Live from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta, this is Lawmakers. For February 3rd, 2010, the 11th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. Here are your hosts.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Susan Hoffman.
And I'm Wendy Lawson. Coming up on tonight's program, Governor Sonny Perdue announces the Georgia Water Stewardship Act, designed to protect Georgia's water resources. And Senator Chip Rogers introduces legislation to expand school vouchers to foster children and the children of military personnel.
But first, our top story for you, the State Ethics Commission launches an investigation into former House Speaker Richardson's transferal of campaign funds. The State Ethics Commission is investigating former House Speaker Glenn Richardson. Richardson transferred his leftover campaign funds to a political action committee, MMV, which he controls. But MMV doesn't appear to be registered with the state or federal government as a non-profit, which is not allowed by the Ethics in Government Act.
At this point in time, nothing has been determined. There was simply an investigation that was initiated, and as always, the Commission performs its due diligence. They investigate the matter. And as Commission staff, our role is to investigate the matter objectively and thoroughly. And at this point in time, we can't say whether or not there's any substantial violations. It appears that the allegations are technical in nature, but after all, this is going to be a matter for the Commission to decide.
Again, there are guidelines in the Ethics in Government Act that actually specify exactly how leftover campaign contributions can be used.
The Ethics in Government Act only delineates a few ways that campaign contributions which are held in excess can be transferred and disposed of. One of those ways is to transfer to a nonprofit organization. So our job is to do due diligence to ensure that the PAC received the funds in an authorized manner.
The problem appears to be that the PAC was not registered, is that correct?
It appears to be that it was not registered as a nonprofit. Of course, it's quite frequent that people make their filings, yet it takes a few weeks or a few months to even go through, so that's completely a possibility. But at this point in time, we don't have any more information on the matter.
So it could be registered as a nonprofit. Y'all are just looking into whether or not it was.
Absolutely, and it's important to mention that just because we're investigating the matter does not mean that there's any sort of violation. We're simply doing our due diligence.
Was this a complaint that was filed on behalf of someone, or how was it brought to your attention?
It was simply initiated by the staff.
The commission attorney said the commission investigated or initiated this investigation on its own, but when pressed, he did say that the office had received calls, questions really, that ultimately prompted this case. Of course, we'll keep you posted. Governor Sonny Perdue today announced an initiative, to protect the state's water resources. Lawmakers Valerie Edwards is standing by at the Capitol with more on the plan, which includes both short and long-term strategies. Valerie.
Thank you, Susan. The Georgia Water Stewardship Act of 2010 is a multifaceted approach to conserving water, and it's based in part on the recommendations from the governor's own Water Contingency Task Force.
Immediately, Governor Perdue wants to reward communities that are aggressive about saving water. Among the things he's talking about are gray water recapture programs, installation of energy-efficient fixtures, and water conservation pricing.
You all know me by now that I'm not much of a one-size-fits-all kind of guy. Every community is unique. Every community has different needs and different resources and supplies. So there's not a comprehensive one-size kind of mandate that you could put on the state that fits every situation. We want to learn from our local communities as they provide local solutions to their problems, and then maybe can teach the rest of the state.
Also included in the plan, starting in 2012, all new residential and commercial construction must use water-efficient fixtures, and more efficient cooling towers in industrial construction, and sub-metering in multi-unit commercial and residential units to allow tenants to self-monitor their water consumption.
Where it makes sense, we're going to ask Georgians to make commitments that we've never asked of them before. And at other points, we will launch incentive-based efforts to encourage creativity and innovation among our very diverse water suppliers and providers through the state.
But the governor's plan doesn't stop at conservation. He wants to develop new water sources.
We cannot totally, as we looked at the numbers, conserve our way into long-term sustainable use in water. There's got to be new sources of supply. And that means interconnections, systems working together better, new reservoirs, reservoir expansions, and other systems and solutions for supply.
Finally, Governor Perdue today congratulated Georgians for what he called the culture of conservation, he says, evolved during the drought. But the governor warned that we can't lose focus, particularly in light of the looming 2012 deadline imposed by a federal judge, which denies the state access to water from Lake Lanier. Look for the Georgia Water Stewardship Act of 2010 to be introduced in the Senate by Natural Resources Chair Ross Tollison, in the House by Natural Resources Chair Lynn Smith. Reporting live for Lawmakers, I'm Valerie.
Thanks very much, Valerie.
Well, Senate Majority Leader Chip Rogers wants to expand the state voucher program that provides scholarships to families who have special needs children, or who move their special needs children, rather, to private schools. A press conference this morning was attended by a military family with 4 young children, whose small voices you'll hear along with Senator Rogers.
I think even the critics of the original legislation would have to agree this works.
Former state Senate President pro tem turned gubernatorial candidate Eric Johnson was on hand to champion an expansion to the voucher program he began in 2007 with Senate Bill 10.
It hasn't harmed public schools at all, but it's helped thousands of children out there. And as I travel around, I talk to the parents with tears in their eyes about how much better their child is doing. And those that have moved on into a private school environment have done so because that's what's good for their children. But even those that stayed behind in public schools say they are getting better services and better attention because they have the option to leave.
Robin Locke says public school wasn't working for her 13-year-old son who has autism. The state school scholarship covers a portion of his $15,000 tuition at a Smyrna private school.
As we were approaching middle school, we knew that things would become a lot more difficult. Let's face it, middle school's really rough for kids. And I just felt like I wanted to get into SB 10 while I could because I was afraid it wasn't going to stay around.
2,100 students currently receive the state aid to the tune of just over $9 million last year. Rogers' legislation would add youngsters with physical disabilities, those in foster care, and the children of military personnel to the roles of eligible recipients. It would also expand the time period when families may apply. Rogers is frank about this bill moving toward his goal of universal vouchers. He wants the Department of Education to support the program, which is currently covered by 1 staffer.
We would encourage the Department of Education to embrace educational choice at every level. And unfortunately, I think that there has been some hesitancy there. And this is not casting aspersions at any individual. But educational choice is a major change from what we have here in Georgia and have had for quite some time. But it is a change for the positive. It is a change that helps students and parents. And so I would ask them to embrace it. And if they need to allocate more resources to ensuring that we give those parents the choice that they can access under law, then they need to allocate those resources.
The DOE was not consulted during the drafting of this legislation, according to a spokesperson I reached this afternoon. He said the department favors parental choice in the form of charter schools over vouchers.
And the House passed a bill that seeks to maintain the integrity of the state employee retirement system today. House Bill 916, sponsored by Representative Howard Maxwell, only applies to state employees within the employee retirement system. The bill says that if an employee has not reached normal retirement age, which is 60, with 10 years of service, and they choose to retire, that employee must sit out at least 2 months before returning to work. The bill also requires that a state employee who retires and then returns to work for the state as a contractor must have had no prearranged agreement to return to work. Again, the House passes the bill, HB 916. It passed 167 to 1, and it now moves to the Senate.
And the Senate today votes to issue temporary licenses to out-of-state medical professionals who volunteer their services in Georgia during a state of emergency, and to protect them from malpractice suits. Senator Preston Smith used the Haitian earthquake to illustrate the importance of Senate Bill 315.
If you look at the situation in Haiti in the last few weeks, and I hate to be too blunt, but quite frankly, it was not the typical medical service that you can get in a hospital today. In order to save lives, they were having to perform amputations without anesthetic. In the several days following that, they were actually using vodka to sterilize wounds so that they could save lives. We want to have, as Louisiana called it, a fully stocked bullpen of people available. And so the bill creates a registry, and health professionals can place themselves voluntarily on the registry in advance, and they can volunteer to be dispatched like a strike team to help when there's a natural disaster. Be that a hurricane that hits the coast of Savannah and Brunswick, be it an earthquake that hits North Georgia, or be it, God forbid, a terrorist event in downtown Atlanta.
Senator Ed Harbison wanted to know under what conditions medical help would be summoned from outside the state.
There's some very specific steps. There has to be a declared state of emergency, which is limited in time by statute. Right. And then once the declared state of emergency exists, those who are already registered can be dispatched by the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. So the state can still refuse people, they can still direct their services, they can still decline their offer if they feel like that it's not safe or it would hinder the state's ability for a rescue operation, for example. So the governor has to declare it, and then the governor's office, the GMA or their delegee, would be the person who would say, yes, we want help, and here's how we're going to use you.
SB 315 passed without opposition, and it now moves to the House.
Trauma experts say we are making progress in putting together a statewide trauma system, but it's really slow going. Today, the House Health and Human Services Committee got an update on how trauma funds have been spent to date and how future monies will be used to facilitate the system. Georgia Emergency Medical Services, EMS, has used a few $1 million in past monies to get old ambulances off the road, but need more monies to update the fleet, particularly in rural areas. In total, they are looking for roughly $4 million of the $23 million set aside in the 2011 budget for trauma.
Most all ambulances on the road are properly equipped. They are low mileage, they're brand new, they're replaced frequently, but in some rural areas that are underfunded, we do have some ambulances with a large amount of mileage on them, anywhere from 200, 300, 400,000 miles. What the intent of this grant is to get those vehicles off the road, get fresh vehicles in those extreme rural areas that are the furthest away from trauma centers.
You're also asking for some monies that would go to train first responders. Be specific. What do you hope to accomplish?
What we hope to accomplish primarily is to train firefighters that are not medics, average citizens, whether they be police officers, school teachers, anyone who can help provide care to a patient before an ambulance and the proper medical personnel are able to get there.
Dr. Dennis Ashley, chair of the Trauma Commission, says we are doing a slightly better job through EMS to get people literally out of the ditch and to a hospital, but improvement is needed. Only about 30% of trauma patients actually get to a true trauma center. He's also working to upgrade communications.
The other area that we're very excited about is the communication center, where we're going to start a pilot project to get the right patient, the sickest of the sick trauma patients, the right patients, the right place at the right time. That's taken a lot to get off the ground. We're not quite there yet, but we've looked at other states. We've put together a white paper that you can read about on our website, gtcnc.org. And
you're using Alabama as a model, are you not?
We're using the Birmingham region of Alabama, and Birmingham has been working on that for over 10 years. And finally, the rest of the state has realized what a good model that is, and over the last 2 years, they've started to go statewide with their Birmingham system. And by the end of the year, they will probably be implemented statewide.
Assuming you are going to get the $23 million from the super speeder fines that are coming in the 2011 budget, how will it be used?
Well, the $23 million, is a long way from what we need. So we've had to regroup a little bit. Trauma centers will not get the full funding for readiness or for uncompensated care. Neither will trauma physicians. But with at least some money on the table, we've not lost any more trauma centers. They're staying in the game, and that's key. We've at least stabilized that section.
But in addition to keeping what you've got, you still want more trauma centers, do you not?
Exactly. We've done some GPS mapping to look where we need those trauma centers to make sure that we decrease the time it takes to get to a trauma center. Our sort of phase one project, where we want to bring on about 10 more centers, that's going to take another. We're doing the financial analysis now, so it's rough numbers, but somewhere between $10, $15 million probably for that phase.
In some cases, aren't people resisting coming into the system because you don't have the money and they can't afford to get themselves to a level 1 right now?
That's correct. They not so much even level 1, level 2. It's hard to make a sell for something you don't have.
The Health and Human Services Chair, Sharon Cooper, is pleased with the Commission's progress thus far, but says obviously much time and much money is needed for a truly efficient statewide system.
The Richmond County seat, formerly held by Senator Ed Tarver, was filled in a runoff election last night. Former state representative Democrat Hardy Davis won that District 22 seat. Davis defeated Harold Jones, taking more than 55% of the vote. He told GPB he is anxious to get to work in the Senate, and Senator Tarver resigned from the Senate when he was selected to head the U.S. Attorney's Office in Savannah.
In other news today, a House committee says yes to a bill that would prevent a student from saying he or she was in a consensual sexual relationship with a teacher. Right now, if a student says it's consensual, no charges can be brought against that teacher.
It was just something that got overlooked. A lawyer found it, used it, but at this point it's important for us because right now all prosecution is shut down in this area, and there have been several cases across the state where right now teachers have lost jobs and done that, but yet they could not be prosecuted for these kind of relationships. So the DAs and the prosecution community were saying, we're stuck right now, and so until this got fixed, and that's the first step in fixing it.
And what kind of punishment do you think a teacher should face if they do have a relationship with a pupil?
Well, we spent a lot of time in committee about that, and what we ended up with is if the child was, or the student was over 16, it's a 1 to 25 and a fine, and it's sort of this, gave the judge a probatable sense, so it's something the judge can look at and determine the egregiousness or the issue of it. So it is a felony, but it's 1 to 25. If they're under 16, that of course kicks in a lot higher statute. It's 25-year mandatory minimum on that.
Do you think this is a rampant problem?
It was more surprising than I thought. When I first started looking at this, just to simply look at this bill, which I was tipped off to when the Supreme Court actually looked at it, I thought, well, maybe this is onesie twos. But over the time, I have found that there's at least 4 or 5 instances that have been brought to my attention just in the last year or so. So it was a lot more than I had actually thought.
Representative Collins says it's really an oversight in the statute. A case came up, a lawyer saw it and ultimately used it, and DAs say that they are really stuck. Again, this bill has moved through committee. House Bill 897 is now in House rules, and of course we'll be tracking it for you. In other news, with unemployment still down, Georgia Department of Labor Commissioner Michael Thurmond testified before House Appropriations Human Resources Subcommittee today. Commissioner Thurmond says $200 million of stimulus money could promote job growth. Lawmakers Laura Fawaz has more.
Some are often surprised that this recession has been very unkind to male workers in our state. And as a matter of fact, and you'll see it a little bit later, some 57%, 58% of all the people who are unemployed and receiving unemployment insurance benefits in Georgia are men, and particularly white men have been really, really hard hit.
Thurmond was asked how unemployment benefits compare to a working Georgian salary.
It averages about $42,000 a year. That's what the average working Georgian makes. So you look at the maximum benefit you can receive from the state of Georgia is $330 a week. And so if you at 42 is about $700 a week. So the difference is about a 60% drop in terms of what you were earning, in terms of what you might receive as a UI benefit.
Representative Penny Houston asked about the proposed $200 million of stimulus money and how job seekers along with employers would benefit.
Right now, the numbers are a little bit nebulous in terms of how many jobs, but that would be an 80-20 subsidized match for up to 6 months for unemployed Georgians, and many of them in the private sector. And that would help employers help offset the cost of bringing in new workers. See, and the conundrum that we're in Georgia is that employers aren't hiring because there's no demand. Well, there's no demand because people are not working. And so until you get people working, you're not going to generate a whole lot of demand. So the theory behind this is that if you directly employ people so that they'll generate salaries, they're going to go out and buy more groceries, and they may shop and buy more clothes, and that'll help stimulate the overall economic growth.
Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Laura Fawaz.
In other news, members of a conservative coalition say they want lower taxes, increased personal responsibility, and more family values. The groups rallied on the Capitol steps this morning. Their most pressing message was less government. Lawmakers Keosha Jackson has the story.
If you all believe in anything, it's less government, and we're giving it to you. We're 46th in the nation in taxes per capita and spending per capita. Georgia is 50th in the nation in debt per capita. You don't get better than Georgia. We have been diligent at not even meeting in the worst of times the debt load we could incur. And we're balancing an awful budget without raising taxes.
If you look at what we started with the first day I took office to where we stand today,
the per capita spending in this state adjusted for inflation is down almost 20%. We came to Atlanta and we did make government smaller.
Not everyone believes small government is a good idea. Senator Doug Stoner says small government can lead to cuts in services.
Well, I think they're going to get in the sense of less government based on what the budget situation is. Our ability to fund basic services right now is severely challenged because of the drop in tax revenues.
Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Keosha Jackson.
Moment you've been waiting for. Time for another Lawmakers Flashback in honor of our 40th season on the air.
Okay, but what you really have been waiting for is to see House Speaker Tom Murphy in action. Here from February 19th, 1979, he deftly presides over contentious debate on a bill concerning revoked driver's licenses.
The true crook, the true drunk, is not going to pay this law, this bill, or anything else any attention, and he's not going to call you and ask you to help him get his license back. He's going to go get drunk, get in his car, and drive off. Now, what we're trying to do is help somebody who's trying to help himself and who's trying to obey the law. You need to turn around and look at the person next to you and think about how many times you've seen him at a reception 4 nights a week. Let's not be hypocritical about this. Having 3 or 4 more drinks and driving to the hotel. We are all eligible for driving under the influence 4 nights a week in this legislature.
Gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will just wait just a minute. The chair will tend to it. Chair will tend to it. The gentleman's remarks were not in accordance with the rules, and the gentleman will please, in the future, try not to let his enthusiasm exceed the rules as he has at this time. The gentleman, I'm sure, being a very fine gentleman, had no intent and no desire to slander anyone. The gentleman was simply stating an opinion that exceeded the rules, and I'm sure the gentleman will not do it anymore. Gentleman, 123rd.
Speaker, I was not in reference to anyone but myself.
Well, the gentleman has that privilege to address himself, but I'm sure the gentleman had no intent to hurt anyone's feelings, or he just used a bad choice of words, and I'm sure that he's sorry that he used it now.
House Bill 433 did end up passing 94-32 with 2 amendments. Tom Murphy was Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives for an historic 28 years, longer than any other speaker in the country. Throughout that period, Speaker Murphy banged his gavel to keep the House in order countless times. This has been a Lawmakers Flashback. Okay, I have to tell you, knowing his temper, he handled that beautifully.
Very diplomatic.
Very diplomatic.
The use of that gavel was pretty effective, though.
For more Lawmakers Flashbacks, please remember to keep watching the 40th season of Lawmakers.
Returning to legislative news, 2 bills intended to ban texting while driving were discussed by the House Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee today. The subcommittee listened to testimony of supporters and opponents of House Bill 944 and merged it with a similar measure, HB 938, but they did not actually take a vote in the subcommittee today. The subcommittee will reconvene on Monday for additional discussion. And when Senator Ralph Hudgens met Gordon Beckham last year, just before the young man began his rookie season with the Chicago White Sox, the senator had one request.
Give me your cell phone number so I can call you if I ever see you do anything that is a discredit and a bad example for young people. And he said, yes, sir, I'll do it. He gave me his number, and I haven't had to call him. I tell you, Gordon has made me proud. Gordon has made the University of Georgia proud. Gordon has made Georgia proud. And I want to let him say a few words to you. It's Gordon Beckham.
All right. Well, no, thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's been an incredible year for me. I've been extremely blessed and to have the chance to come down to the Capitol and get to meet people that I don't know and really get recognized is a great honor for me, and I'm very humbled to be in front of you guys.
Gordon Beckham, of course, plays third base for the Chicago White Sox. He was named the Sporting News 2009 American League Rookie of the Year.
And to think I missed getting his autograph today. That was a shame. And now to that story that we promised you yesterday. If you saw fire trucks and firefighters around the Capitol, there was no reason to be alarmed. It was the 38th annual Firefighters Recognition Day. Lawmakers Laura Fawaz has the story.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Firefighters, along with their families and state leaders, gathered at the Capitol to honor our Georgia firefighters, as well as honor those lost in the line of duty.
It's my honor, once again, to proclaim February 2nd, 2010, is Firefighter Recognition Day here in Georgia.
My greatest days have been part of the fire service of the state of Georgia because you make up the finest men and women that the good Lord ever put on this earth.
I want to thank you for taking up the mantle and not asking who else can do this job, but choosing to do it yourself.
A unification agreement was signed in hopes of bringing all Georgia fire services together as one team.
With the signing of the unification is saying that the fire service in Georgia has agreed to come together and talk and discuss all issues before we pursue them, and then that way when we come to the Capitol we can come as one unified group. Everybody, I guess, kind of going to the old saying, singing out the same page in the songbook.
The common message delivered here today at the Capitol was a simple but very important one. Thank you to all the firefighters throughout the state of Georgia. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Laura Fawaz.
That's a great job, Laura. In addition to general recognition, several firefighters were presented with individual awards for their outstanding service.
So we're going to check in with some news from around the state. I don't know if there was any fires or not,
No
but
fires.
Ricky Bevington joins us.
Thankfully, no fires to report in tonight's newscast. In news around Georgia, the State Public Service Commission wants the federal government to refund electricity ratepayers in Georgia $1.1 billion. Yes, billion with a B. This request comes as President Obama and the U.S. Department of Energy end a decades-long pursuit of a permanent storage site for nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain in Nevada. For nearly 3 decades, utilities that use nuclear energy have paid money into this trust fund to develop the site. The payments were required by federal law. The federal government decided to halt efforts at Yucca Mountain after years of opposition from Nevada residents who feared the site would threaten their safety. Governor Sonny Perdue says the state will do everything in its power to save another Georgia school system from losing accreditation. He has appointed 2 special liaisons to assist Warren County schools, that's in East Georgia. They will guide local school officials in completing steps to avoid accreditation loss. Those steps come from the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, which recently announced that Warren County would lose accreditation this summer because of mismanagement by the local school board. The liaisons are the same whom Governor Perdue appointed in 2008 to help Clayton County with its accreditation loss. And Metro Atlanta hospitals are sheltering 6 trauma patients from earthquake-ravaged Haiti. Among them, an 18-month-old girl with a head injury and a U.S. Marine. The patients were flown into Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Marietta last night, and the flight is the first of several expected to come into Atlanta this week. There is always more Georgia news at our website. We're at gpb.org, and you can follow us on Twitter. We're at GPB News on Twitter. And Wendy.
We always appreciate those updates. Thanks, Ricky.
Tomorrow on Lawmakers, we're going to continue our series of leadership interviews with Senate Majority Leader Chip Rogers. We're going to have that exclusive interview and all the latest from under the Gold Dome tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And if you've missed any part of this program, please tune in when Lawmakers repeats tomorrow morning at 5:30. And coming up next on GPB, it is David Zelski, Valerie Edwards, and Phil Proctor in Georgia Traveler. Tonight's episode features a book tour of Georgia. Then please stay tuned for the season premiere of Georgia Outdoors. 2 episodes back-to-back tonight. Those programs, again, coming up here on GPB TV.
All right, well, that's going to be our program for this, the 11th legislative day of the 2010 session of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm Susan Hoffman. Please join us tomorrow for Lawmakers at 7 p.m., only here on GPB.
Good night.
Good night.
Funding for Lawmakers comes from
the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Georgia's business community, over 4,000 members strong, working with lawmakers for over 90 years to make sure that our state remains a place where companies thrive.
And by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.